My name is Emily. I am 24 years old, and I was standing in the middle of the bank lobby staring at a piece of paper that proved my own mother had stolen my entire future. It was a Tuesday morning, the day I was supposed to pay my first semester of college tuition. Instead, the teller handed me a statement showing a balance of zero. $45,000, the money my late grandmother left specifically for my education, was completely gone. When I rushed home, my heart hammering against my ribs, I found my mother, Susan, and my younger sister, Chloe, laughing over expensive bridal magazines. My mother didn't even flinch when I screamed. She just took a sip of her coffee and told me Chloe needed a dream wedding more than I needed a degree.
The coldness in her eyes shattered something inside me forever. But I knew right then I would not let them destroy my life, even if it took me years to get justice. Before I go back to the beginning of this nightmare, I want to pause and ask you something. I always wonder how far my stories travel, so please tell me in the comments, from what state or city are you listening to this right now? It really helps me feel connected to you all. Now, to make you understand how that day at the bank completely broke me mentally and emotionally, I need to take you back to how my family always operated behind closed doors. I grew up in a house where there was a clear, undeniable division of love and affection. I was the responsible one, the quiet one who got good grades, did the chores, and never asked for anything. My sister Chloe, who is 22 years old now, was the absolute golden child of the family. Even when we were little kids, the rules were completely different for her. If I accidentally broke a plate while washing dishes, I was grounded for a week and called clumsy. If Chloe broke a window throwing a ball in the house, my mother would say she was just being creative and energetic. My mother, Susan, who is now 52, made it her absolute life mission to ensure Chloe never experienced a single moment of discomfort or accountability. I learned very early on that if I wanted anything in this life, I had to earn it entirely by myself. That is exactly why my grandmother, before she passed away from cancer, set up a special trust account just for me. She was the only one who saw the blatant unfairness in our household. She knew my mother favored Chloe heavily, and she wanted to make sure I had a guaranteed way out. The money was meant strictly for my college tuition, but because I was under 18 when my grandmother died, my mother was legally listed as the custodian of the account. For years, I religiously checked the statements that came in the mail. I watched the interest grow, feeling a sense of security that I desperately needed. I worked grueling part-time jobs all through high school just to pay for my own clothes, my phone bill, and my school supplies, never touching a single dime of that fund. I stayed up late studying every single night, dreaming of the day I would walk onto a university campus and finally start a life of my own, far away from my mother's toxic favoritism. I truly thought the money was safe. I thought there was a moral line even my mother would not cross, especially since it was my grandmother's dying wish. I was so incredibly naive to believe she would protect my future. Then came the year I was finally ready to go to college. Chloe had just gotten engaged to a guy she had only known for 6 months, a flashy guy with no real career or ambition. My mother was absolutely ecstatic. She immediately started planning a wedding that looked like it belonged in a reality television show. There were massive floral arrangements being ordered, custom designer dresses being fitted, and a venue booked at a luxury countryside estate. I remember asking my mother how they were paying for all of these massive expenses, since I knew she worked a regular administrative job and didn't have much in savings. She just smiled a tight, secretive smile and told me not to worry about it, claiming she had managed to secure some special funding and take out a few personal loans. I should have known right then and there. I should have checked the bank account that very second. But I was so focused on packing for my dorm, buying textbooks, and preparing for my new adult life that I blindly trusted the system. I went to sleep every night imagining my dorm room, entirely oblivious to the fact that my mother was actively signing away my future to pay for ice sculptures and champagne for my sister. The morning I went to the bank to get the cashier's check for my tuition was a beautiful, sunny Tuesday. The teller, a sweet older woman named Martha, who had known me for years, looked at her computer screen for a very long time.
her brow furrowed in confusion. She typed something again, frowned, and then looked up at me with absolute pity in her eyes. She told me the account had been completely emptied and closed 3 months prior by the custodian, my mother. I felt all the blood drain from my face instantly. My knees actually buckled, and I had to lean heavily against the cold marble counter just to stay standing. I drove home in a dangerous blur of hot tears and absolute panic. I burst through the front door of our house, the printed bank statement trembling violently in my hand. My mother and Chloe were sitting comfortably at the kitchen table, surrounded by expensive fabric swatches and gourmet catering menus. I slammed the paper down right over their magazines and demanded at the top of my lungs to know where my money was. My mother slowly put down her expensive pen. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look ashamed. She looked profoundly annoyed that I had dared to interrupt her wedding planning session. She looked me dead in the eye and casually said that family helps family, and Chloe needed the money for her big day to start her marriage right. I was hyperventilating, struggling to pull air into my lungs. I screamed that it was my college fund, money my grandmother explicitly left for my education, not a giant party. Chloe just rolled her eyes, sighed loudly, and told me I was being incredibly selfish. She actually had the audacity to say I was smart enough to get student loans, but a wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime event, and she deserved to feel like a real princess on her special day. I lost my mind. I screamed at them that it was pure theft, a criminal act that I would not forgive. My mother stood up abruptly, her face turning bright red with rage, and told me that as long as I lived under her roof, I would not speak to them with such disrespect. She declared that she was legally allowed to move the money as the custodian, and that she had decided it was better spent on Chloe's happiness. I packed everything I owned into black trash bags that very afternoon. I didn't have a plan, but I knew I would rather sleep on the street than spend another night in that house with them. I called my best friend, Mark, who is 25 years old, crying so hard into the phone that I could barely form a coherent sentence. Mark lived in a tiny apartment on the rougher side of town, but he didn't hesitate for a single second. He drove over in his beat-up truck and helped me load my trash bags into the back. As we carried the last bag out, my mother stood on the front porch with her arms crossed. She coldly told me that if I walked away over some money, I was completely dead to her. I just got in the truck and watched my childhood home disappear forever. The next few weeks were undoubtedly the darkest and most depressing days of my entire life. I had to painfully unenroll from my dream university because I could not pay the tuition deadline. I felt like a massive, humiliating failure, even though it wasn't my fault at all. I slept on a cheap air mattress in Mark's tiny living room, staring blindly at the cracked ceiling. I felt a deep, suffocating grief that made it hard to breathe. It wasn't just the devastating loss of the money, it was the absolute betrayal by the person who was supposed to protect me. But eventually, the paralyzing sadness slowly turned into a cold, burning anger. I decided right then that I was not going to let them win and ruin my life. I aggressively searched for work and found a job at a greasy 24-hour diner on the highway. For the next 2 years, my life was a relentless, brutal cycle of physical exhaustion. I would wake up, put on a stiff uniform that smelled faintly of old frying oil, and work grueling double shifts. I served cheap coffee to truck drivers and aggressively saved every single dollar I made to survive. Nice Seed ached so badly at the end of each day that I could barely stand in the shower. My hands were constantly burned from hot plates and cracked from harsh cleaning chemicals. But every single time I wanted to break down and quit, every time I felt I couldn't take another rude customer yelling at me over cold eggs, I thought about my mother's smug, arrogant face at the kitchen table. I thought about Chloe spinning in a designer dress paid for with my grandmother's love. That fiery rage became my absolute fuel, pushing me to work harder than anyone else in that diner. I finally saved enough to start taking classes at a local community college. I paid entirely out of pocket, carefully taking only the exact number of credits I could afford each semester. I would sit in the back of the brightly lit classrooms, physically exhausted, drinking terrible vending machine coffee just to keep my eyes open. I took frantic notes until my hand cramped, determined to absorb every piece of knowledge. Mark was my absolute rock during this dark time. He would patiently help me study with flashcards while I folded my cheap uniforms, and he always made sure I ate something nutritious instead of just leftover diner fries. During this exhausting period, I also started looking deeply into my legal options. I refused to let them steal my grandmother's gift without a fight. I visited a free legal aid clinic in the city and met a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who listened intently to my story. He explained that since my mother was the legal custodian, proving outright criminal theft to the police was difficult, but pursuing a civil lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty was highly possible. My grandmother's will explicitly stated the educational purpose of the funds. My mother had clearly breached her legal obligation to protect my inheritance. The lawyer was so moved and angered by the solid evidence that he agreed to take my case on contingency, meaning he would only get paid a percentage if we actually won the lawsuit. I signed the heavy stack of legal papers with a shaking hand. I knew this officially meant going to full-blown war with my own blood family, but in my heart, I knew they had already declared war on me the day they drained that account. The legal process was painfully, agonizingly slow. Months turned into years of endless paperwork, aggressive motions, and agonizing waiting games that tested my patience every single day. Meanwhile, as I was slowly building my life from the dirt up, Chloe's perfect fairy tale life started to crumble spectacularly. Her grand, insanely expensive marriage lasted exactly 2 years before they filed for a messy public divorce. The flashy guy she married turned out to be incredibly lazy, chronically unfaithful, and financially irresponsible, which matched Chloe's toxic traits perfectly. They had blown through all of my stolen money on the lavish wedding, a luxury European honeymoon, and designer furniture, leaving them with absolutely nothing to build a real life on. My mother, desperate to maintain the illusion of a perfect family, had to take out a massive second mortgage on her house just to help Chloe pay off her mountain of credit card debts. The universe was slowly starting to serve them a very bitter plate of karma. I, on the other hand, was finally seeing the bright light at the end of the long tunnel. After 3 grueling years of community college and working at the diner, I transferred to a prestigious state university and secured a job as a teaching assistant, which gave me a full tuition waiver. I was finally thriving. I was surrounded by brilliant professors who deeply respected my relentless work ethic, and amazing friends who supported my ambitions unconditionally. The sharp pain of my family's betrayal was still there, a dull, heavy ache in the center of my chest, but it no longer controlled my daily thoughts. I was actively proving to myself that I didn't need their stolen money or their fake love to succeed. I was becoming an independent, strong woman, entirely on my own merits. Then the official legal depositions finally started. Sitting in a stuffy, cold conference room across from my mother was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. It had been 4 long years since I last saw her on that porch. She looked significantly older, visibly tired and deeply bitter. Chloe was there too, looking miserable, cheap, and highly defensive. When my lawyer started aggressively questioning my mother about the specific bank transfers, she tried to act confused and play the victim. She falsely claimed it was a desperate emergency family expense that she planned to pay back. But my lawyer was ruthless. He pulled out the thick binder of receipts and financial traces. He had legally subpoenaed the high-end caterers, the luxury florists, and the exclusive bridal boutique. Every single stolen dollar was traced directly, undeniably, to Chloe's wedding expenses. My mother completely lost her composure. She started yelling right there in the quiet deposition room, pointing a shaking finger at me and calling me a vindictive, ungrateful brat. She screamed that she gave birth to me, clothed me, and fed me, and therefore she was naturally entitled to use that money however she saw fit.
My lawyer calmly and coldly reminded her that the law of the United States did not agree with her twisted maternal logic. Chloe just sat there, staring blankly at her phone screen, cowardly refusing to look me in the eye. I felt a strange, cold sense of pity for them. They were so deeply consumed by their own delusion that they couldn't even see how pathetic they looked to everyone in that room. The lawsuit dragged on for another full year as they tried every dirty delay tactic in the book. My mother's desperate lawyer kept trying to offer insulting lowball settlements to make the case go away quietly. First, they offered a pathetic $5,000. Then they bumped it to $10,000. I fiercely refused every single one of their offers. It was never just about the money anymore. It was about forcing accountability. It was about making them stand in front of a real judge and legally admit what they did to me. I kept working hard, I proudly graduated with my degree in finance, and I landed a fantastic, high-paying job at a corporate firm in the city. 5 years. That is exactly how long it took from the horrific day I stood crying in the bank lobby to the day my phone finally rang. I was sitting comfortably at my large desk in my new corner office, looking out at the beautiful city skyline, when my lawyer called. His voice was incredibly steady, but I could hear a distinct hint of triumph. He told me the judge had finally issued a ruling. There would be no more delays, no more appeals, and no more hiding behind fake excuses. My heart was pounding so hard against my ribs that I could literally hear the blood rushing in my ears. I gripped the edge of my desk and asked him what the final verdict was. He took a deep breath and told me the judge had ruled completely and entirely in my favor. My mother was officially ordered by the court to repay the entire $45,000 she stole, plus 5 years of accumulated interest, plus absolutely all of my expensive legal fees. I felt tears prick my eyes. He explained that because my mother had acted with such clear malicious intent, gross negligence, and a blatant disregard of her legal fiduciary duty, the judge had also awarded me punitive damages to punish her behavior. The total amount she legally owed me was now nearly $80,000. The judge had ordered a strict legal lien to be placed on her house immediately. She was given a very short, non-negotiable deadline to pay the massive judgment in full, or she would be legally forced by the state to sell the home I grew up in to satisfy the debt. The reality of what that meant hit me like a ton of concrete bricks. My mother was going to completely lose her house because she chose to buy my sister a fancy party. 2 days later, my cell phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was shaking violently, but not with her usual arrogant anger. It was pure, unadulterated panic. She was crying hysterically into the phone, begging me to call my lawyer off. She sobbed that she would be homeless and living on the street. She pleaded with me, desperately using my childhood nickname, telling me over and over that family doesn't do this to family. I took a very deep, cleansing breath and spoke to her for the first time in 5 years. I told her that she was the one who taught me exactly how family treats family. I sharply reminded her of the day I begged her for my college money, the day she smiled so cruelly and told me Chloe's wedding dress was vastly more important than my education. I told her that I spent years washing dirty dishes, smelling like grease, and crying myself to sleep on a deflating air mattress while they shamelessly drank champagne on my dead grandmother's dime. I told her that actions have consequences. She started screaming again, calling me a heartless monster, saying I was ruining her life on purpose. I didn't yell back. I simply hung up the phone in the middle of her sentence and blocked her number permanently. I felt a massive, suffocating weight lift off my shoulders and vanish into thin air. A few short months later, the house officially went on the market and sold. The escrow company wired the settlement funds directly into my checking account. I immediately took a portion of it and paid off my accumulated student loans completely and put a solid down payment on a beautiful house.
Looking back at everything I endured, I realized that the greatest and most painful lesson I learned was that shared blood does not make a family. Only respect, love, and fierce loyalty do. My mother truly thought she could steal my entire future and leave me to rot in the dirt, but all she actually did was teach me exactly how to survive and thrive without her. I built my own unbreakable strength directly from the shattered ruins of her betrayal. Now, I want to know your honest opinion on this situation. If your own mother stole your inheritance for a sibling, would you ruthlessly take her to court and let her lose her house? Or would you let it go just to keep the family peace? Tell me in the comments. Until the next story.